Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We need to make sure these cases don't result in a dramatic uptick once again.
More COVID-19 cases in BC as health officials warn against high-risk gatherings. Also,
I crashed because I got hit by a negligent driver.
A cyclist is left broken and angry after getting hit on the Sea to Sky Highway by a load of wood. And
devastation in Lebanon. A massive explosion kills dozens of people and levels buildings in Beirut.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Mike is away tonight. Small gatherings and private parties continue to be a source of concern for health officials as COVID-19 cases creep upwards in BC. The province's efforts to prevent further spread over the long weekend will be seen in the coming days. But with no additional deaths over the weekend, there are some signs of optimism.
there were 146 new cases since the government's last update on Friday. That's about 37 new cases a day. Of slighter concern, though, there has been a positive test at an assisted living facility in the Fraser Valley. A staff member has tested positive at the Maple Ridge Seniors Village. 8 people in hospital right now, and 4 of them are in ICU.
And when it comes to schools, questions are still flooding in around safety, alternate options, and even possible delays for the school year.
Our Zara Premji is in studio with more on that. Zara, we've been hearing concerns from parents about the province's back-to-school plan. What are they saying?
Well, they're using a petition to have their voices heard, and it has gained almost 15,000 signatures from parents calling on the government to make the fall return to class voluntary. Now, BC's plan stipulates parents have the option of registering their child for online learning or homeschooling, depending on availability. Despite this, organizers of the petition are still saying they're frustrated and worried for their kids.
Essentially, you're exposing 120 families into a much more enlarged bubble than previously, all these months that we've been trying to social distance and play it safe.
They're also calling on the health ministry to make masks mandatory. Alberta and Ontario have now included that as part of their plans for certain grades, but Dr. Bonnie Henry says she still doesn't see enough evidence to make that a necessity.
Zara, what does Dr. Henry have to say about this petition and the anxiety that parents and some teachers are feeling about the fall?
Well, she says she still stands by her decision to send kids back to school because of the negative impacts on mental and emotional health when removing a child from classroom learning environments and how that could be dangerous.
Know that some children will fall behind and will never catch up, and this will affect them for the rest of their lives. It is that important for us to be able to have school, manage school. For some children, home is not a safe place to be. Many of them have not been in a classroom for, it'll be up to 175 days.
Now, she says she empathizes with the anxieties parents are feeling, and there are different types of learning options available. And she's leaving it to the districts to create their detailed plans, which are due on August 26th. Lien, Dan.
All right, thank you for that. We'll be watching for it. Zara Premji reporting live for us tonight. And our provincial health officer is accusing airlines of giving her turbulence.
Dr. Henry wants them to cooperate with contact tracing so travelers can be warned.
But as Susanna De Silva tells us, the airlines insist they are helping.
4 months into the pandemic, and BC's provincial health officer is still surprised by how little contact information airlines provide when someone tests positive on board.
It would shock you to see what we get from the airlines when we request a flight manifest.
Bonnie Henry says once the travel restrictions and mandatory quarantines came into place, they stopped trying to contact everyone who may have been exposed on a flight. But that is changing as more people begin to travel.
The information is being collected for a different purpose. And when we need that information to find out who's around, all they know is it's somebody who paid $66 for that seat.
In the last 2 weeks, there have been positive cases on 7 flights in BC, 34 across the country. And Dr. Henry says it often takes days to get the details they need. But WestJet and Air Canada refute that. Air Canada saying they are baffled by her concerns that all information and manifests are provided to any Canadian health authority upon request within 24 hours as part of a well-prescribed process for all infectious disease management. That they and other major airlines have reached out to Dr. Bonnie Henry's office on multiple occasions to discuss any concerns she may have, and they have so far refused to get back to us.
And the people who do the contact tracing are saying the information is inadequate. So people can judge whether whose position is more important. I think it's the people that do the contact tracing.
Canada's top doctor stresses there hasn't been a case of transmission on a flight, but that contact tracing is a priority.
I do think there's an opportunity going forward to maybe look at that in a new concerted way.
Transport Canada says flight manifests limit information for privacy reasons. The agency says it's working with the provinces to strengthen contact tracing. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
A massive explosion has killed at least 70 people and left thousands injured in Lebanon.
It's not yet clear what caused the blast in Beirut's port area, but the damage stretches over several kilometers. Freelance reporter Rebecca Collard is there and has more on the situation.
This is going to be just absolutely devastating for the people of Beirut. They're going to have to deal with this horrible number of casualties, and on top of that, of course, this destruction, this physical destruction of the city. I'm almost 3 kilometers from the port, and we've seen these images of my own apartment. The doors were completely blown off, even the inside doors blown off. Every window almost in my apartment is smashed. Windows and doors from the balcony were basically picked up and chucked across my living room, and that's kilometers away from the blast site. So that gives you an idea of the intensity. Now, what we first heard, of course, was that this was a fireworks storage that was caught on fire. We're now hearing from people from the Port Authority that there was chemicals, that there was explosive chemicals in this storage facility, and that's why the blast was so big. But I think there are still a lot of unknowns. I think we don't know the full story yet. There's been a lot of speculation online and from different political actors saying that it was a weapons cache, making all kinds of accusations. We have no information to confirm any of those accusations at this point. But I will just add that, you know, this is happening in a time of political intensity. Like, there has been a lot of tension in the recent weeks between Israel and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah and other political actors in the country. So I think that's fueling a lot of the accusations and a lot of the concerns. But at the moment, we really don't have any more information than what we're hearing from the authorities, that this was some sort of fireworks storage, and that there was possibly some chemicals that had been stored for a long period of time that then caught on fire, causing this massive mushroom and this explosion. The hospitals are now, all of them, as far as I know, completely overwhelmed and completely filled with victims of this horrible blast today. And what that's going to mean for coronavirus and for outbreak and for the number of cases and the Lebanese medical system's ability to respond to that, I think is going to be really, really difficult. Like it's going to make a difficult situation even worse.
Freelance reporter Rebecca Collard reporting for us from Beirut earlier tonight.
And that tragedy is directly affecting many British Columbians tonight as well.
That includes the honorary consul of Lebanon here in Vancouver, Nick Kawaji, who says he's never seen anything like this.
I spent 15 years of my life in Lebanon during the war. It was never like that. We never had this destruction of that amount. I mean, comparing the photo of Beirut before and after the explosion is something that makes you cry. Unfortunately, one of my friends, a Lebanese Canadian friend who went back to Lebanon 2 years ago, he died from the impact of the explosion, and that's make you cry.
We'll have more on the terrifying day in the Lebanese capital later this hour.
A Vancouver cyclist is lucky to be alive after being hit by a load of lumber on the Sea to Sky Highway yesterday.
As Eva Yuguan-Senge reports, the crash has renewed calls once again to improve bike safety.
Ribs 1 through 8 going down are broken, and I have a punctured lung.
45-year-old Todd Nickel also has a broken clavicle and scapula after he was hit while cycling, and he's mad as hell about it.
I refuse to call it an accident. It wasn't an accident. It was negligence. I crashed because I got hit by a negligent driver.
This was the truck that hit Nickel from behind. Witnesses say a strap broke and the wood planks shifted to the right. A second cyclist behind Nickel was hit first by the lumber and tried to warn Nickel.
I heard him shout, and then almost at the same moment, something hit me in the back of the head. And I went down and ended up on the pavement in the middle of the lane on my back.
Nickel was on his way back from his first 100-kilometer ride. The accident happened as he passed Lions Bay on Highway 99. Nickel had to be taken to Lions Gate Hospital.
I started having trouble breathing, so I knew that it must be a little bit more serious, and that was really frightening to me.
The truck driver has received a ticket for driving without consideration and with insecure cargo. The two violations come with a combined fine of nearly $500. But cycling advocates say that's not enough to prevent future crashes.
There should be harsher penalties for people driving if they're not being careful to protect the vulnerable road users.
Chinna also says the painted shoulder on the Sea to Sky isn't enough to keep people safe.
There's nothing a person cycling could have done in this case. They are in the bike lane, the supposedly bike lane, and they got hit from behind. There's nothing at all this person could have done.
Nickel says he's already seen some comments on social media blaming him for the crash. But he says the outpouring of support has been much greater.
That piece is going to go a long way to getting me healthy again. I'm going to recover from this. It's going to suck for a couple of weeks, but the mental aspect is going to be a lot tougher to get past.
He's eager to get back on the bike as soon as he feels physically and mentally recovered. Eva Yuguen-Senge, CBC News, Vancouver.
Notorious gangster Jared Bacon is set to be released after serving a 9-year drug trafficking sentence, but he'll be restricted by several parole conditions, including living in a halfway house. Bacon will also have to avoid all liquor primary businesses like bars and clubs. He can't take drugs for non-medical purposes, and he has to avoid contact with anyone believed to be involved in crime. He was found to have violated the terms of his last release in late 2018 when he tested positive for cocaine.
People living north of Princeton are being told to be ready to leave at a moment's notice as a wildfire burns out of control nearby. 43 properties are under evacuation alert right now. 21 hectares have been scorched so far. The BC Wildfire Service says its defenses are well placed, but there are unpredictable weather conditions ahead, and it wants to be sure things are under control before giving people the all clear.
The weather update is brought to you by Fortis BC. Using more energy these days? We've got energy-saving tips, easy upgrades, how-to videos, and more.
And meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joining us now with a look at the forecast. And you've been keeping your eye on the wildfire risk as well, Joe.
That's right. Those unpredictable weather conditions fire officials are talking about is an approaching cold front set to bring rain for Thursday, but it'll mean gusty winds ahead of that front. We're waiting for the rain here in Vancouver, too. We could probably use a little midweek blip, and I've got that in the forecast. But I want to start off with that fire danger map. We have 19 active wildfires across the province. You can see the areas where we're still in high to extreme. Those are the regions where we're dealing with those 19 active wildfires. Just one interface fire, that one north of Princeton you were mentioning, and then 3 other out-of-control fires. However, none of them are a threat other than the Princeton one, but officials are watching this situation closely with that approaching cold front. It's always a double-edged sword when we get a system change bringing rain, because we have to deal with those gusty and shifting winds that may spread current fires. We're worried about lightning, but then that's the only way we can get rain in the forecast. I'll break it down coming up. Quick look at our temperatures right now, 23 and through YVR. Quite pleasant with a nice marine breeze. Still a bit of a humidity out there. High pressure is holding strong, but there you can see that cold front already bringing showers to Haida Gwaii and northern coastal sections. That is what will sweep across the province. So let's take a quick look at how things will play out, impacting all of British Columbia over the next 24 hours. So that cold front will slide down across Vancouver Island, bringing showers to the north of the island for tomorrow afternoon, holding off another blue sky day here in Vancouver. But then watch as we head into the evening hours, that rain will fill in, sticking around for Thursday and moving across to the interior where we really need it. So I'll time it out for you in more detail, and we'll talk about rainfall amounts because it's not a huge rainmaker, but we will definitely take it. I'll have more details coming up.
Sounds good. Thanks, Joe. Transit police have teamed up with a Vancouver high school for an anti-sex offense poster campaign. It'll feature artwork by students from Sir Winston Churchill Secondary School. It's aimed at teaching people about the kinds of sexual offenses that can happen on a bus or a SkyTrain. The grade 12 students contacted transit police after seeing the pervasiveness of the problem. Their work shows incidents of unwanted touching and what witnesses can do when reporting sexual offenses.
We strongly encourage members of the public and passengers that at any time they feel uncomfortable while using public transit or if they feel unsafe to please discreetly text message our dispatchers in real time.
If you see a sexual offense on transit, you can text Transit Police at 877777. Transit Police say tackling sexual offenses has been one of its 4 big priorities since 2012. And a reminder, you can watch this newscast live on CBC Gym. The free app is also where you can find a whole bunch of our other CBC programs.
And CBC Vancouver is also on social media. You can follow the both of us and Johanna on Twitter and Instagram as well.
Identity theft has put hundreds of Canadians served checks in a holding pattern. How they fell victim and the challenges they're facing after this.
And thanks for watching us online, where we are ad-free. As of today, renters in Ontario can once again face eviction. The process had been on hold because of the pandemic.
The resumption sparking dueling protests today, with landlords and tenants calling on the government to do something. Lorenda Redekop explains.
Tenants and their advocates headed to the Landlord and Tenant Board building in Scarborough. They say in a pandemic, evictions should not be back on.
Fight, fight, fight. Housing is a right.
Emily Armstrong says her partner lost his job. Her landlord refused to negotiate their rent, so she'll be moving back with her family.
In an economy like this, I can't afford to on the next tenant.
Right now we have dueling protests going on. Here are people from Acorn and the tenant side, but also we have the small landlords. Some are saying that yes, they can work together, but there's also a lot of tension here.
Both want their side heard and seen. The landlords say they're also frustrated with the government.
We also shame on Ford because he said, if you don't have money, you don't pay. It's unreasonable.
This landlord fears he'll lose the second home he rents out.
The first person who moved in, she was a professional tenant, I didn't know. And she robbed me from the second month she moved in there. And since June 2019, she had not paid a single dime.
If the landlord pressure the government to give to the tenants or do some way that we can pay, well, we will be more happy working together.
2 weeks ago, the Ford government passed Bill 184, which it says protects both landlords and tenants. While some fear thousands of people could be evicted, a former adjudicator with the Landlord and Tenant Board doubts that will happen, that instead other solutions will be worked out.
My prediction is there will be long repayment plans because this isn't happening in a vacuum. I think there will be 1 year, 2 year repayment plans that adjudicators order.
Both groups say they're suffering during this pandemic and want the government to support them. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Tough situation for everyone. All right, stay with us. We will have more on what's making headlines from around the country in just a few moments.
The federal government's free COVID Alert app is being criticized for not being accessible enough. It's supposed to notify users when their phones have been in the same area as another phone that belongs to a person who has tested positive for the coronavirus. But as Karen Pauls explains, some Canadians are experiencing technical difficulties.
Gordon Payne is trying to download the new COVID Alert app.
It says I need a different version of the operating system that my phone cannot handle.
It requires users to have Apple or Android phones made in the last 5 years and a relatively new operating system. Payne has an iPhone 6.
Not everybody has the ability or the financial means to afford the latest technology that is required to run this software.
This Ontario NDP legislator says her parents also tried, in vain, to download the app on their older iPhones. Now she and others are raising concerns about accessibility for older Canadians and marginalized groups, some of the most vulnerable people when it comes to COVID-19.
It's not enough to build a tech tool that works well for white Canadians or affluent Canadians. It needs to work for all Canadians, or the government needs to be really, really clear as to why they are not doing so.
For now, the app is only linked to the Ontario healthcare system. Atlantic Canada will likely be next. This Manitoba restaurant owner has been trying to follow what he calls confusing public health orders.
When you walk around the patio, you can see all the tables and chairs are spaced out.
He knows his industry is frontline, so even though he's not a fan of more government intervention, if the COVID Alert app becomes available, he'll likely download it.
To make sure that any people I'm with who, could be seriously injured by a respiratory virus, protecting them and keeping them safe.
Meanwhile, Gordon Payne has asked the Ontario government to fix the download problem. He's a high school teacher and will soon be surrounded by students.
If I come into contact with them and one of them tests positive, I would really like to know that for the benefit of my health and the people around me.
At least 65% of Canadians need to use the app for it to be effective, and that won't be possible unless the federal government finds a way to make it more accessible. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
And the southwestern region of Ontario is still a trouble spot in the province. So for now, it's stuck in stage 2 of the reopening. More than 1,000 migrant farm workers there have fallen sick. And as Ellen Morrow tells us, some say their rights are being violated.
Luis Gabriel Flores contracted COVID-19 at an Ontario farm and says his employer fired him for speaking out about conditions there. We worked 16 hours a day, he says. The housing conditions weren't good. Some workers now say their employers are confining them to the farms where they work, asking them to sign agreements that prevent the workers from leaving even to get groceries or go to a bank to send money back home.
Dijeron que no íbamos a salir para ningún lado, pero llegaba una tiendita y nos daba las cosas al doble de lo que costaban.
Migrant workers nationwide live in often cramped dormitories where physical distancing can be impossible. The federal government has pledged more than $58 million to improve conditions, but farmers remain under pressure, says the Canadian Federation of Agriculture.
We're doing the best we can. And when you consider how huge and diverse agriculture is in Canada, you might have a greenhouse, you might have a dairy farm, you might have a mushroom farm, you could have a potato farm. And you think of each of those production systems has different requirements for labor and different situations in the day-to-day work.
Frankly, what's really needed, say workers' advocates, is permanent residency status.
This shows yet again that in a temporary immigration system, employers can choose to use, abuse, and exploit people.
Farmer Jen Fenning employs workers from Jamaica. Despite the pandemic, she says farmers should not be restricting their workers' movements.
They're, creating a separate set of rules for a specific group of workers isn't fair.
Flores says he's proud he went public. He was friends with one of the workers who died from the virus. I am happy to speak for him, he says. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Toronto.
Many Canadians are relying on emergency benefits from the federal government to pay their bills and get through this pandemic. Now CBC News has learned hundreds of them are victims of identity theft. And as Lauren Pelly tells us, it's left them waiting weeks, even months, to get their checks.
I was like, uh-oh,
I just had a feeling that this wasn't good.
2 months ago, the government rejected Tamara Cater's application for a fourth round of CERB support.
I was just shocked.
Shocked because she had already received 3 rounds of CERB payments since April. Government records showed she had also filed a claim for employment insurance for losing a job she had never held. Cater has since missed $4,000 in payments.
Eventually, they figured out that someone had applied for some type of EI benefit under my name.
She's now among hundreds of unemployed Canadians who've had their identities stolen and used to apply for government benefits over the course of the pandemic. So far, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre says it has received more than 700 reports of identity fraud linked to CERB. 384 of those reports came from Quebec. Another 172 were from Ontario, and British Columbia had the third most reports with 52.
It said that I had applied for period 1 on June 30th, which I had not.
This New Brunswick mother of 5 later learned someone else hacked her account and collected a check on her behalf.
I was a little scared. I immediately checked my online banking and to make sure that everything else was secure, that there was no breaches in any other of my finances.
The Canada Revenue Agency told CBC News it is prioritizing fraud and identity theft calls. They also noted anyone eligible for CERB benefits will receive their missed payments.
No one can tell me when it will be resolved. I've been able to borrow money from people to pay my rent, but that's also an uncomfortable feeling when everybody's under stress.
For now, Cater says she's stuck in limbo with no answers and no cash coming in. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, the UN has launched a global campaign called Save Our Future. It calls education the great equalizer in a world of inequality and recommends getting children back to school when it's safe to do so. Not doing so, it warns, will mean students who are at a disadvantage will fall even further behind.
Now, we face a generational catastrophe that would waste untold human potential, undermine decades of progress, and exacerbate entrenched inequalities. The decisions that governments and partners take now will have lasting impact on hundreds of millions of young people and on the development prospects of countries for decades to come.
A Norwegian cruise ship has resuspended its operations over COVID-19 concerns after an outbreak on board reached 43 cases today. As Kayla Hounsel tells us, the impact could devastate an already wounded industry and the local businesses that rely on it.
Kurt Bulger is preparing orders for delivery. His gift shop in downtown Halifax is open now, but still struggling.
I still have 9 employees that I can't bring back because I don't have enough sales. We're doing about 1/6 of the sales that we should be doing this time of the year.
It's because so much of his summer business usually comes from cruise ships. Each year, Halifax alone welcomes around 350,000 passengers. The worry now is that news of more outbreaks at sea won't help bring them back.
It's simply another, you could say, a crown on a particular bad year.
This global studies professor says the Norwegian ship, the MS Roald Amundsen, was testing the waters. It didn't work. There are now 43 cases of COVID-19 on board, mostly crew members, but hundreds more are in quarantine awaiting test results. The ship also serves as a local ferry, so there's a concern some passengers may have disembarked unaware and spread the virus to communities along the route. The cruise line has apologized and admitted it made mistakes. The ship is now tied up, and Norway has closed its ports to ships carrying more than 100 people for 2 weeks. Canada's ports are closed until the end of October, effectively canceling the season. But there are questions about 2021.
What matters is if the people feel confident enough to take a cruise, if they have also enough discretionary income to afford traveling, and that's the biggest issue.
Still, he believes it's possible for the industry to rebound next year. Kurt Bulger isn't convinced.
Unfortunately, I fear that that part of the industry may be broken for a long time, if not forever.
Bad news for business owners who, like the cruise industry, are just trying to stay afloat. Kayla Hounsel, CBC News, Halifax.
The race to find a vaccine for COVID-19 has clinical trials moving at unprecedented speed. As Christine Birak explains, a process that usually takes up to 5 years is now happening in less than 1.
For a new virus, it's never happened this fast before. Potential vaccines are entering final phase 3 clinical trials. It's a process that usually takes years, if not decades. So how can it be happening in months and without compromising safety?
I believe it's possible. You just need to put the effort into it.
And a lot of money.
And a lot of money.
At Laval University, Gary Kobinger is working on a potential COVID-19 vaccine. He says no one's sacrificing safety. Instead, vaccine development is mainly being sped up by advanced manufacturing, global cooperation, and designing flexible clinical trials.
Now everything is compressed. People are lining up their phase 2 as they are doing their phase 1.
Phase 1 is a safety trial. The potential vaccine is given to a small number of healthy volunteers. Normally, one phase ends before another starts. But if early results show the vaccine is safe, health regulators continue to monitor it and allow phase 2 to run at the same time. Phase 2 and phase 3 can overlap as well.
We're spending way more money than we would spend on a regular development track.
Regulators worldwide, including Health Canada, are also working together to oversee the vast amounts of data from those trials, resulting in a much faster review time than the standard 300 days. If a vaccine proves safe and effective in getting the immune system to fight this coronavirus, those changes alone could shave years off the development process. But companies are also banking on that advanced manufacturing.
Meaning, let's just invest in manufacturing, let's have the doses ready, and if the vaccine is a good candidate, we don't have to go back to do the manufacturing. We already have the doses available.
It's never been done before, but leading COVID-19 vaccine contenders are now producing their vaccine.
So even though it is a lot of investment to manufacture at risk, it is compressing timelines.
Safety checks are baked in, but when a vaccine fails, and most of them do, it's expensive. Outside a pandemic, it's a risk few companies would ever take. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
Healthcare professionals across this country are being called out today for doing a poor job of treating people living with obesity. The criticism comes in an influential Canadian medical journal. As our David Thurton explains, doctors are being advised to take a different, more empathetic approach with obese patients.
Ian Patton has not only struggled with obesity, but finding the right doctors to treat his condition.
We're just not being treated with the same dignity and respect that other people have been for other chronic conditions.
Patton isn't just a patient, he's also part of a group of researchers that's released new guidelines calling for health professionals to better treat people like him. The advice published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal calls on health professionals to move beyond simplistic approaches of eat less, move more, and address the root causes of obesity.
We need to recognize that we did a very bad job of the treatment of obesity and overweight for a long time. That has to end. We now have good treatment options and we need to implement them.
The paper says a range of factors contribute to obesity, not just poor eating and lack of exercises. Other factors, genetics, mental health, and where people live play a part. So the authors are recommending obesity management should be about improved health and well-being, and not just weight loss. And alternative treatments like weight reduction surgery, medication, and psychological therapy should be considered. And toxic assumptions that overweight people are lazy, Wharton says, need to be eliminated.
So someone who's 250 pounds may have way more willpower than a person who's 170 pounds. Why? Because they could be 350 like that. Whereas a person who's 170 doesn't have to work all that hard.
I would like these clinical practice guidelines to be a tool where patients can take them to their doctor and drive the new narrative about obesity.
So patients, Payton says, can exercise their right for better care. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
It was an explosion that killed dozens and injured thousands of people. The effort to save the victims on the ground in Beirut and understand the cause next.
Canadians are a nation of inventors. It's true. Among other things, we've come up with the telephone, the foghorn, basketball, and more recently, Trivial Pursuit. And like those other inventions, the latter was a phenomenal success. It sold millions of copies and made its inventors rich beyond their wildest dreams.
Now, others are hoping to hit the jackpot with games of their own. But if they expect the world to beat a path to their door, they may be very disappointed. In a report first aired last season, the Journal's Doug James found that inventing a successful board game can be a dicey business.
4.
1, 2, 3, 4. Nope. Again.
New games, old games. All kinds of board games. People are playing them like never before. The renewed interest in board games is good news for those who sell them. 2 years ago, Canadian retailers rang up $30 million in board game sales. This year, they expect to sell $50 million worth. On the other hand, sales of electronic games are dropping as people turn away from the exciting but impersonal technology. Trivial Pursuit caught the new mood. It burst onto the market in 1981 and became an immediate success. Last year, assembly lines turned out more than 20 million copies, and the Canadian inventors have become millionaires. Now, all across the country, others are hoping to do the same with games of their own.
We saw the success of Trivial Pursuit, and I guess like everybody else who's a newcomer to the business, saw the tremendous amounts of money, and so visions of sugar plums sort of danced in our heads, and we said, hey, let's see if we can share in that.
What is Alfred M. Butts known for?
Alfred M. Butts is the father of Scrabble. His is the success story every game inventor aspires to. Despite Scrabble's great success, it didn't make Alfred Butts a millionaire. But he was able to buy back his great-great-grandfather's house in upstate New York. Now, at 85, Alfred Butts lives the life of a country gentleman. But like so many inventors, he came up with the idea of Scrabble when he was broke and out of work.
I was an architect, and I lost my job. I was in the Depression. And I thought, well, maybe I could invent a game. So I studied games and came up with the idea of improving on anagrams. I had a game which I called Lexico, which I thought was an improvement on anagrams.
Lexico became Scrabble, which in turn became the best-selling game in history. It's still going strong. Last year, sales were up 15%. But if Alfred Butts had to start all over again and sell Scrabble from scratch, how far does he think he'd get?
Well, I don't know. I can't answer that question. Probably not very far.
For the Journal, this is Doug James.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Many of them have not been in a classroom for, it'll be up to 175 days, and the type of learning that many children need in that classroom setting is something that we need to make a priority.
Health officials say back-to-school plans are going ahead in BC despite concerns raised by some parents and teachers. Dr. Bonnie Henry addressed those questions today about school safety and announced 146 new cases of COVID-19 in our province since Friday. Thankfully, no one has died.
Going to recover from this. It's going to suck for a couple of weeks, but the mental aspect is going to be a lot tougher to get past.
And a cyclist is thankful to be alive, and he says he's mad as hell after he was hit on the Sea to Sky Highway with a load of wood. Todd Nichols says this unsecured bunch of lumber plowed into him Monday afternoon. He has numerous broken bones and a punctured lung. Squamish RCMP says Nichols and another cyclist are believed to have been hit after a strap securing the load appeared to break. The truck driver could be hit with hundreds of dollars in fines.
Tonight, the people of Beirut are reeling from two powerful explosions that have caused massive destruction and killed dozens of people near the city's port.
The cause seems to be highly explosive material that was stored in a warehouse for years. But as Renee Filipponi reports, the result is more misery for a country already mired in economic crisis and political unrest.
In videos posted online, a huge fire can be seen burning in the port. Then, a large explosion. massive mushroom-like cloud, and a shockwave causing a powerful blast. Balconies were blown off buildings. Glass shattered everywhere. "I don't know what happened," said this man who was fishing at the time. "I heard there was a fire. I turned to head home and heard something explode." Across the city, witnesses, including this Canadian visiting Beirut, said they have never felt anything like it.
It felt like an out-of-body experience because you almost felt death. You were thrown and you couldn't, you were almost like breathless. It was like a breathless, horrible experience.
Rescue teams continue to search for people trapped in the rubble. Officials are blaming the blast on highly explosive material stored in the port. 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate, seized 6 years ago and stored there since. The Prime Minister says that's unacceptable. "I promise you this crisis will not go unpunished," he says, and called the explosion a catastrophe. Lebanon has long known the terror of explosions. Today's events were triggering for some, taking them back to the 2005 car bombing assassination of former Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri. A verdict for that killing is expected Friday. Now today's disaster compounds the misery in Lebanon, where life was already a struggle, with the country facing economic collapse made worse by COVID-19.
People are really reeling and hurting. So when this happened, I couldn't imagine, what else this country could go through that's even worse than the situation now.
Tonight, hospitals are overwhelmed. Some are turning patients away as the search for victims continues into the night. Tomorrow, the grief will be marked with the first of 2 national days of mourning. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, London.
A wildfire near Los Angeles has thousands of people fleeing for safety. How this fire grew so big so fast. Coming up.
And at 6:41 p.m., a live look at Falls Creek. You can see Science World glittering away right over there. Pretty. Believe it or not, there's wet stuff in the forecast and much needed at this point. Joe is back next to break down how much rain we might get and how long it'll last. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Sylvain.
And I'm Nicola.
And we bought a bleacher house.
Come on in, let's take the tour.
This home is a sensory experience.
Above the bleachers, where it's open, there's a view. There's the kitchen. Under the bleachers, where it's more dense and it's more introspective, and this is where we were. We are both architects. We designed this house together, we built it together, we argued on it together, and we're still living both in it together.
Beyond this white wall, there's the bathroom.
The bleachers is like a big piece of furniture. The benches and the blocks are versatile. Is inspired by the view.
It's a glass wall, so you're inside and you feel like you're almost outside all the time. When people first walk in, they are impressed with the space, with the view, but they are not sure if it's a nice place to live. It's by seeing us that they understand.
Kids love coming here. You can climb everywhere. It's playful, but adults too. Every comfort and function is well integrated. Everything is there. It's just not the same visually as we are expected to see.
The curtain is used to hide away the mess of the kitchen. Hidden under the kitchen is the secondary bathroom.
Voila. The sleeping booth of the guests. The guest sleeping space gets good comments because it's intimate and cozy. This is the main bedroom. Everything is black just to have a more intimate atmosphere. So when we have more than 2 guests, we can make them sleep on these 3 levels. The house feels like home because it's made for us. We did it for us. It's a unique house.
Monsoon season has hammered North and South Korea with torrential rain, and that has unleashed tons of earth with sometimes deadly effect. In South Korea, 42 consecutive days of rain have left 14 people dead, including 3 members of a New Zealand family who were vacationing northeast of the capital. More than 1,000 people have been forced from their homes, and parts of many major highways and bridges have been flooded in Seoul. North Korean state media is warning residents of possible flooding there as well.
And Hurricane Isaias came ashore in North Carolina overnight as a Category 1 storm. It's since been downgraded back to a tropical storm. It brought driving rains and sustained maximum winds of nearly 120 kilometers per hour. Thousands of power outages have been reported. The storm continues to track north along the eastern seaboard through New York toward Quebec.
The weather update is brought to you by Fortis BC. Using more energy these days? We've got energy-saving tips, easy upgrades, how-to videos, and more.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. Joe, a bit concerning with the stormy weather out on the East Coast, but here on the West Coast, it's the heat and the dangers there that we're watching out for.
That's right, and it's not just our West Coast. The heat is present all the way down the U.S. western seaboard, and that has meant extreme fire danger for California. I just want to take you there for a moment. Pictures from the Apple Fire. This is the first big fire of the season for 2020 for Southern California. It really exploded in size over the weekend. This is a picture from space, and you can see the smoke being drifted down towards the south. Almost 8,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. This fire is only 15% contained. So watching that one closely, 12 structures have burnt, and crews are battling difficult terrain. This fire is just north, or northwest, I should say, of the LA Hills. So I'll keep you posted on that story. Back up towards the West Coast, and we have, again, warm and sunny temperatures fueling our high fire danger on the island as well as inland. Out towards the interior, I should say. 31 is the humidex right now in Squamish, 29 for YVR. Definitely feeling very muggy out there. So this rain is very much needed, taking you through the forecasted accumulated rainfall. So this is how much rain we're expecting once the system tracks down towards the south coast tomorrow night and then across the interior for Thursday. So those yellow spots, that's where we're expecting 40 to 60 millimeters. That's where we already have low fire danger. The light to darker green, that's sort of 5 to 20 millimeters. So I think that's the most that we're going to get for fire areas. It's something, and as I mentioned earlier, it will come with gusty winds. But look at these temperatures. It is very much needed. Tomorrow's highs in through the interior, 35 and through Osoyoos, 28 up towards Revelstoke. Watch as I take you through to Thursday, though. Quite a drop as that cold front comes through. In fact, a 5 to 10 degree drop across the province thanks to that cold front. So here in Vancouver, it will feel notably fresher. In fact, our coolest day in about 2 weeks, and we will get some more comfortable nights. Our overnights have been around 17, 18 for Vancouver. And after this cold front moves through, I'm thinking more like 14, 15. So that will make a big difference for our evenings. So here's how that 5-day forecast is panning out. 25 tomorrow, which is more like a 27 or 28 inland. Lots of sunshine, increasing cloud towards the late evening hours, and I think the rain will hold off until after midnight. Most of the rain will fall overnight and through Thursday morning. I have lingering showers through Thursday. Again, I'm thinking 5 millimeters at this point. We'll be lucky if we get closer to 10. I'll be able to hone in a bit more on those rainfall totals and for each region tomorrow's forecast. Back into the sun for Friday, we get a new little high pressure building, but look at those temperatures, much more comfortable. In fact, our seasonal for this time of the year is about 22 for YVR, and our overnights are about 13, 14. So still a little warm and through the overnights, but getting back into that seasonal mark for the weekend and beyond. The next rain after that I don't see until about a week from now. So it has been a dry end to July and a dry start to August after such a wet spring, and it's amazing how quickly that fire danger can turn around. So we'll be happy for the rain.
Absolutely. We are appreciating those showers. Thank you so much for that, Joe. Well, scandal has led the former king of Spain to flee his country. He's being accused of corruption.
As Cindy Palm reports, it's fueling debate about the legacy of the once revered head of state and the future of the Spanish monarchy.
Spanish citizens may have been protesting against the former king this summer, but it still came as a shock when Juan Carlos packed his bags and reportedly fled to the Dominican Republic or Portugal on Monday. This woman from Madrid says, "This king has really let me down." Another resident says, "I think he's running away like a coward." The 82-year-old is being investigated for alleged money laundering, including 65 million euros he received from Saudi Arabia through an offshore account. His lawyer says he'll be available if prosecutors need to speak with him. King Carlos came to the throne in 1975 after the death of General Francisco Franco and was widely respected for his role in helping to guide Spain from dictatorship to democracy. In 2014, he abdicated the throne following a previous corruption investigation, and his son Felipe took over. Earlier this year, King Felipe renounced his father's inheritance and ended his father's €200,000 annual allowance to try to show that he was a different kind of king. The palace says the former king left the country to allow his son to rule in peace. The former king's decision to leave is being seen as an attempt to save the reputation of the monarchy. Today, Spain's prime minister threw his support behind the royal family, praising its decision to distance itself from what he called reprehensible behavior. But some Spaniards say it's not enough. For me, the monarchy should be abolished, says this man. Former King Carlos was expected to go down in the history books as a hero of democracy, but instead, history will now show a legacy clouded by corruption. Cindy Palm, CBC News, London.
It's not usually what you think of when you picture Canada's north, farming. But Yukon's short season challenges, both wet and dry, are coming up after this. Stick around.
I'm CBC journalist Will Fundal, and I'm non-binary. But what exactly does that mean? We'll answer some of the gender questions you always wanted to ask in our new podcast, They and Us. Listen now.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
What is gender identity? What does non-binary mean? Subscribe to the CBC BC original podcast, They and Us, and join host Will Fundell as they explore these questions and more. And in honor of Pride, we're highlighting people from the LGBTQ community in BC making a difference. Browse through all the amazing individuals at cbc.ca/proudtoshinebc.
It has been a rainy summer in Whitehorse. For some farmers, that's been very good news.
For others, it's a problem, especially when it comes to growing hay.
As Philippe Morin reports, some farmers are now rushing to harvest all they can, with summertime fading out.
Finally, the sun is out, and that means it's time to work. Richard Fisher is 19. He's a farmhand. These days he's been using this precious dry weather to the maximum, working some 12-hour days.
If it's sunny and it's dry, I don't know, I don't mind working long days. I like working long days. So it doesn't matter to me. I'd rather just get it done while we can.
Getting it done means cutting, drying, baling, and storing the hay. And for that, it needs to be dry.
This is not ready. This is freshly cut. Like we cut this last night, so it's still pretty bendy. So it's not dry. It's still green. You can smell the green, you can feel the green, you can feel the moisture, so it's nowhere near ready.
Anne-Marie Stockley's family has been farming hay for decades in Whitehorse. She says wet hay can rot or grow mold or lose its value.
It's garbage. It's pretty much garbage. You can, if it's really, the worst case scenario is that you lose everything.
This week there has been some sun, and so the Stockley family and hired help have been making the most of it, working sunrise to sunset, which is a long day in Yukon.
We probably started around 8 o'clock in the morning. Like this morning I was in the tractor at just after 9. Last 2 nights it's almost midnight when I stop. So you go home, you sleep, and you get up and you do again.
While it has been nerve-wracking and exhausting, there is some good news. The crew has made the best out of a short few sunny days, and it looks like this year's harvest will be good.
It was pretty good. It's nice, it's pretty weed-free, so this is good stuff, I think.
The hay gods have smiled on us, and everything that we've cut so far has got baled up and put away dry, which is awesome.
Philippe Morin, CBC News, Whitehorse.
That's what you want, right? The hay gods to smile down on you.
That's right. Well, they have long days in a place known for very long days, especially in the summer.
And we've had a pretty wet growing season so far, so hopefully some of the dry weather coming up is good for some of our farmers too. All right, you can always find our news program online at cbc.ca/BC.
And I will be back with your late news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.
Good night.